Markets are heading into the North American Open with a more constructive tone after a shaky start to the week as risk sentiment stabilizes alongside a pullback in oil prices and a partial easing in geopolitical stress. The early week jitters were driven by renewed tensions in the Middle East, but with no meaningful escalation and crude prices backing off from recent highs, markets are finding some footing again. That's feeding into a softer dollar and a modest recovery in risk assets, with equities looking to rebuild momentum after last week's push to record highs and high beta currencies stabilizing after recent pressure. Looking ahead to the week, the focus shifts squarely to inflation and the consumer. US CPI will be the headline event, with the markets watching closely for signs of how the recent energy shock is feeding through into prices. Expectations for a firm print, with headline inflation potentially picking up on higher fuel costs, while core remains sticky, particularly across services. This will be critical in shaping expectations around the policy path for the Federal Reserve, especially as markets continue to debate the likelihood of rate cuts versus a prolonged higher for longer stance. Beyond CPI, U.S. retail sales will offer insight into the health of the consumer, with expectations for a slowdown after a strong March, raising questions about the sustainability of demand in a higher cost environment. In Europe, UK GDP will be in focus as markets assess growth momentum against a backdrop of persistent inflation, while in Asia, wage data out of Australia and policy signals from Japan will add to the global picture. Central bank speakers will also be active throughout the week, reinforcing the importance of communication as policymakers navigate a more complex inflation growth trade-off. The broader takeaway is that markets are trying to reestablish as a risk on footing, but the outlook remains highly sensitive to incoming data and energy dynamics. If inflation prints hot and oil reaccelerates, the recovery in sentiment could quickly fade. But for now, with oil off its highs and geopolitical tensions contained, markets are cautiously leaning back towards risk as the week gets underway. That's all for now.